All right, it is Monday, and joining me behind the table is the one and only Alyssa Farah Griffin.
Hello, Brian.
Hello.
Happy Monday.
How are you?
Good. Are you back and rested from D.C.?
Yeah, I went down to the White House Correspondents Dinner, which you've been to many times in many roles,
Yeah.
I imagine. So it's probably different when you're part of the administration and
Totally
a guest
different.
and everything else.
Yeah, you feel like you're working it when you're part of the administration. And I went twice when I was with Pence, because I think Trump banned people from attending at some point. And it's fun, but you're sitting with journalists. You're aware of like eyes looking at you, how you react to jokes. And people also like reporters will ask you questions about like policy and things that are happening. So you have to be very on. Like I wouldn't have like a glass of wine at it. But then it was very fun when we went, like almost all the co-hosts a few years ago. That was the first time I got to do it like a party, and it was a great time.
And that's when you introduced me to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs when I was holding Sarah's purse.
Yes, I introduced you to General Milley, a 4-star general in his proper attire, and you're holding a bunch of purses.
Like 3 or 4 purses. Yeah, that was great. This time there was no comedian. Amber Ruffin was supposed to do it and then wasn't, and she'll be on the show soon to talk about that. And there was no sitting president there. So it was a little more subdued, but it was to honor journalism. And, you know, as the views under ABC News, we're not a news show per se, but I was honored to be there with my ABC News colleagues. And it was a nice night. I had at my table the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S.,
Interesting.
who I got to speak to at length.
Fascinating.
She told me that a couple things. One, she's a huge Whoopi Goldberg movie fan.
Amazing.
Not surprising. Who isn't? But
I actually bet Zelensky is, because he was like a comedic actor before he was.
Yeah. She loved Ghost.
president.
We talked about Ghost a lot. And then she told me that she felt bad for me because my job seemed stressful.
You're like, what?
The Ukrainian ambassador.
Literally navigating a war right now, but
God bless.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's what's always fun is to see who you'll get seated next to, and you can get really interesting ones. Sarah and I were 2 years ago seated next to Mayor Adams, and he was perfectly polite but not chatty. Like Sarah can talk to a wall. She couldn't pull a sentence out of him.
Sure.
And it was interesting. But then we were with some other ABC folks who we had a great time with. But I have sort of mixed feelings about this one. So I heard from a lot of journalists that they loved that this was really just a celebration of journalism, and the focus was on them and the importance of their work. And I think that's really important, because something I always say is like, we need reporters now more than ever.
Absolutely.
And when you think of insert horrible thing you heard about that's happening somewhere in the world, or horrible thing that Donald Trump did that you're worried about, you most likely know about it because a journalist worked their sources and worked the angles to bring that story to you. So they need support more than ever. But I think the downside, my worry would be, it may not get the same attention, and their work may not, without sort of the pomp and circumstance of the celebrities and the comedians and all that. So I hope there's a world in which maybe there could be a merging of the two, because they also do incredible work giving away scholarships, and you need to have that.
The speeches were really compelling, and they were talking about important things, and I was glad I was there, but it definitely didn't get the usual coverage you'd expect. Although I was one table away from White Lotus star Jason Isaacs, which is very exciting.
I saw he was there. Everyone was very excited.
My daughters were excited that I was near Lucius Malfoy
Yeah, I was going to
from Harry
say,
Potter.
it depends your generation.
Yeah.
To me, he's both.
Sure.
A lot of people seemed excited he was there. He was also, I appreciated, wearing a hostage pin.
Yeah.
He's Jewish. And I'm friendly with Eugene Daniels, who's the president of the White House Correspondents Association. And I didn't watch all of it, but I watched a lot of clips. I thought he did a very good job.
So too.
And I thought he was kind of pitch perfect on what the role of the media is right now. And obviously a big moment was Alex Thompson at Axios, who has this forthcoming book about Biden, kind of acknowledging that journalists have to acknowledge when they maybe miss stories or don't get full stories. It was seen as controversial. People had different takes on it, but I've worked with Alex. I've known him since he's younger than me, since he was like a editor for Maureen Dowd, and then like branched out as his own journalist. He's a really excellent reporter, and he's not a partisan. And I just would encourage people, like, judge his reporting on the merits when you see it. Don't let maybe a knee-jerk political reaction.
Well, he was
frame it.
addressing the fact that there's a distrust in mainstream media, and one of the things, and he's saying that, sure, a lot of that is propaganda, but also, in order to reinstate faith in mainstream media, we have to stand up and say we missed a story. He was talking about President Biden and some of the reports about his dropping in cognitive function as throughout his presidency, and the perceived cover-up of that. So it's an interesting thing.
And I do think, just from a societal standpoint, if and when we ever get past this like hyper-polarized environment where like half the country believes just fundamentally different things than the other half, the way we're going to get there is having a strong media that people trust. And
Right.
I don't blame the media entirely at all. Donald Trump's launched vicious attacks on the press. There's also a lot of disinformation around the press that makes it harder to trust them. And we live in sort of this democratized environment where you have, everyone has a podcast and a loud voice, regardless of if they have facts or actual reporting. Although podcasts are great, like this one.
They're the best.
But I do think that a really strong, trusted, intrepid press is what's going to actually bring the country back to like sort of at least being on the same sheet of music.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. All right. So speaking of all this, we're approaching the 100 days mark for President Trump's first term. Or second term, rather. I'm sorry. What do you make of where America is right now with the Trump presidency?
100 days, like what a long, strange trip it's been.
Really?
I am stunned by where things are this short of time in. If you look at the polling, he is underwater of any modern president in modern polling history in terms of his approval rating. And it's a precipitous drop from just election day, just several months ago. But the most stunning numbers to me are that his trust has declined on the economy and immigration, the two issues he was arguably elected to deal with. And the main driver behind the economic distrust is that more than 68% of Americans do not agree with how he's using tariffs in this trade war that he sort of just decided to launch into, that I think Americans are really going to start feeling the impacts of. And I think, well, actually, let me break that into two places. So on the economy, the Trump White House needs to brace themselves because the biggest CEOs of major places, Target, Walmart, are saying they're days, if not weeks away from having massive supply chain disruptions, having empty shelves, and having to hike prices. When the big giants are saying that it's going to affect them that way, you can't even imagine what the fear that small businesses have that don't have the same revenue to be able to like kind of just take on some of that cost. That is all going to fall to Americans who are going on several years of high costs of inflation and who are struggling enough. And I think there's going to be a real backlash from the public if he doesn't reverse course on these tariffs and quickly. But on the immigration side of this, I wanted to talk about this, and maybe we'll get a chance on the show. Donald Trump has a really good success story to tell, but he's counteracting it with horrible actions that are indefensible. And what I mean by that is he's effectively stopped the border crisis. By simply enacting some simple policies at the border on enforcement, we've gone from something like 250,000 crossings down to like in the hundreds. That's what people wanted. They just didn't want people coming into the country who we don't know who they are, who they aren't vetted, and we don't have a process to take care of them when they're here. But then on the flip side, he's allegedly, reportedly deported American citizens, or he's deported people without due process. And that becomes the whole focal point. If I were advising him still, I would say, just pump the brakes on deportations and focus on the success story that right, left, and center people can't argue you've achieved. And then slow down. Make sure you're actually targeting the people that 93% of Americans agree should leave the country, which are people who've committed crimes. But go after them in a way that has a process and due process and follows the rule of law and sends them to their home country, not to a third country they have no relation to. It's his inability to get out of his own way is something I'll never understand.
Well, it seems like to admit a mistake of any kind is something that just he cannot give anybody else a win.
He can't, but I mean, it reminds me very much after we got the COVID vaccine and he'd lost the election. I was saying, like, Mr. President, go around the country and say, I'm going to get as many shots in arms as I can. I'm going to be able to be the guy that got the economy reopened, that saved a lot of lives. And he couldn't do it because he was really just hung up on the fact that he lost. He wanted to argue whether he had lost, and was even starting to give into this vaccine skepticism despite it being his success. Mm-hmm. And on this, I'm like, you have on a silver platter a success story that took you 2 months to secure the border, but instead you're doing all these other things that I just don't think Americans voted for.
No, and it's interesting because for the longest time, even when the negatives started creeping up in Donald Trump's presidency, immigration was still considered a positive. And now in these most recent polls, he's not, people are not with him. There's more negatives than positives on even immigration. So the border, he's still doing well, but immigration in general, it's turned a little bit. Do you feel like they're saying it's the most unpopular first 100 days in 70 years or something like that. Does it feel that way to you? Do you feel like the worm has turned a little bit or not so much?
Yes and no. I always want to be careful to not be in my bubbles. When I'm in New York or Washington, it feels like people are they're outraged. And you see it in the media coverage. You see it in the constant noise and headlines. There is a very genuine frustration. And these protests are very real. What's happening at town halls is very real. What I haven't seen evidence of yet, but I think that you could, especially when you're feeling it in your pocketbook, is Republicans being like, we made a mistake.
Right.
I've not, if I'm being honest, I've not seen that in any major way.
Did you see that in the first term at this point?
No. There was a lot of there was almost a fascination of we've never elected anyone like this before. It's kind of wild, but let's see what happens. I'm still waiting. I felt it the most probably on tariffs and to some degree Ukraine, seeing Republican elected officials push back. But I haven't seen something that suggests voting Republicans are really frustrated with him. And let me explain why I think that is, if I may.
Please.
I was talking to my husband this weekend. People just consume information differently. So I'll talk to friends in my neighborhood or friends I went to college with who are Trump supporters, and they hear Abrego Garcia, the man from Maryland who was deported to El Salvador, and they say, well, DOJ put out a document that says he's MS-13 and he beat his wife. Well, if you dig a little deeper, that is true. There was a restraining order for allegedly abusing his wife, but the person who said he was MS-13 ended up being fired later, and it likely wouldn't have been admissible in court because he was somebody who had misrepresented information on police documents. But if you're watching, let's say, Fox News all day, you're not hearing that story. You're hearing that he's abused his wife and that he's probably MS-13. And you're seeing that on official government documents without some of the context. And I don't fault people when they go to sources they believe they should trust, that they've watched for decades. And there has been a change in the last 10 years. It's gotten a lot worse, the factual sort of
dissonance.
Yes, dissonance between. So that is a big thing, because I have people ask me, how could any of your co-hosts or your liberal friends disagree that we should be deporting criminal migrants? I'm like, I don't really know anyone who disagrees with that. It's that they should have due process under the law and that we should make sure they've actually, in fact, committed crimes.
Yeah. I'm going to be really nerdy for a second. I'm watching Star Wars Andor, which is that Diego Luna show that it's all about how basically democracy falls and rebellions start and things like that. And it was written 5 years ago, I think, but you're watching it and it's all about how it's all tied to the absence of objective truth.
100%.
And it feels so resonant when you watch it. I highly recommend it. I got a little bit of a sneak preview of the whole season, but it's totally worth watching.
I will totally check it out. That's what I think it is. We're living in post-factual environments. And yes, well, it's incumbent on citizens to seek out truth. People are living their lives, they're taking their kids places, and they're turning on a certain news channel and they might think they're getting accurate info. And by the way, there's a lot of misinformation on the left as well. This is certainly not just right-wing media, but I think that's a big factor in it.
Yeah, and I think looking at different sources as much as possible is
the best
thing you can do. All right, let's change gears and have a little bit of a more fun conversation. I think this is fun. We had this Bill Belichick story on we had it loaded up for Hot Topics today, and then we ran out of time, as we often do, and extended the political topic, but we didn't get to it, and I know you were hot on it. Bill Belichick, for those who don't know, is a legendary genius NFL coach, potentially the greatest of all time. And I say that as a Giants fan. He did an interview with CBS Morning, and it was him being interviewed, and a couple of times his 24-year-old girlfriend, Jordon Hudson, shut down the interview a little bit.
And he's 73, we should know.
Yes, he's 73
years old. If you somehow aren't familiar with him.
And he's famously mercurial and tight-lipped and doesn't give a lot, but she seemed a little controlling, and it was kind of shocking. I wanted to get your feel on this.
So I saw buzz on Twitter about this interview, and I was like, I have to watch it. It's one of the most awkward 8 minutes of your life. And I know Tony, who was doing the interview, he's a great journalist. And it's not a gotcha. He's asking him pretty basic questions.
This is CBS Sunday Morning. This is not a gotcha show.
This is not a controversial show. And yes, they're just kind of talking. Bill's very, Bill. And out of nowhere, the gal in the back's like, he's asked, how did you guys meet? And she goes, we're not talking about that. And I, as someone who interviews people and has been interviewed many times, I'm like, wait, that's an option? We're allowed to just say, we're not talking about that. And also only makes people's minds wander more about how they might have met. And then it just gets even weirder. So I don't know if you appreciated this, but Tony very awkwardly asks him about some of the social media posts his girlfriends put up. And they're like, there's one of you holding her and she's like a mermaid. And Bill looks like he's never heard of this in his life. And he definitely didn't know this was anywhere public. Yeah. And he's like, I'm not personally big on social media. It's a classic. A boomer who the girlfriend takes a picture and he assumes it's going nowhere, it's for them. And then the Gen Z girlfriend is like, oh no, this is getting edited. I'm a mermaid and it's going on the internet.
I mean, it's worth taking a look at if nothing else.
So good.
So I guess the question people have, first of all, the age difference, which is not unheard of, but is pretty shocking, I think.
Okay, he's a legend, and my husband, who's a diehard Patriots fan, would kill me if I said anything negative about him. So I'll frame this. Okay. He's incredibly successful, which means incredibly wealthy, and he's in the twilight of his life. So I think he's maybe at the I'm 73, I'm just going to have a good time.
I don't have trouble understanding what the appeal is for him. It's the other side that I'm having trouble with.
I think the 70 million might be the answer there.
I guess so.
I mean, he is a fascinating person.
He is, and honestly, I've met him actually a couple times, and in person, he's incredibly charming, I thought.
Is he? Okay, because I couldn't tell if he'd be very
very different. He was joking and laughing, and when I met him, he wore a suit. It was on another talk show. But he seemed like it was different than I expected. Because in his interviews, it's always well, we're on to the next city. We're on to San Francisco. We're on to Tampa Bay. And, he didn't want to answer questions about feuds or the Tom Brady stuff, and he'd kind of take out people that asked stupid questions. Yeah. But in this case, apparently, Jordan's taking out people that ask stupid questions.
Yeah, and he must like that about her. But I don't know. I think that with women, there could be a certain intrigue to there's definitely an intrigue to powerful men.
Yes,
and he is a powerful
person.
He is a powerful person. That's a bit of a gap for me.
What's the largest age difference you've dated?
Mine's not bad. Mine's 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's significant though.
It's still, and to be honest, I also think that the ages you are make it more significant. Like a 40-year-old and a 52-year-old doesn't feel that significant, but I was 24 and he was, would have been 40. Am I bad at math? 46? That's not right. 36. Yeah. I'm really bad at math. Yeah, he was not in his 40s. That is more significant. Like, I was a baby, and he was a lot more established in his career. But I've told the story on the air before. He lied about his age. Oh. So he had told me he was 30, and I kind of had this under 10 years rule, and I only found out that he was older than that because his birthday was listed in Politico Playbook because he was DC famous. Oh. And it said that he was turning whatever age he was. And I was like, what?
Wait a minute. Yeah. No, I mean, I do think, and there's also, honestly, I can be honest about this. There's a maturity issue with men, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think a 24-year-old man and a 24-year-old woman don't necessarily have the same level of maturity.
My husband's actually the only guy I've dated who's close in age to me. He's 1 year older. I've always dated 4 to 6 years older for the same reason. Because I had fun in my 20s. I partied, but I was very career driven, and I don't think there was a moment in my 20s that I found that men my same age were as driven or focused as I was.
My wife was 24 when we got married, and I was 28.
That's a good difference,
That felt good, although it felt like she was younger than me then. Now we feel very much the same. The only time I dated older once. I was 23 and dated a 29-year-old. And in my head, I've said this before, I was robbing the grave in my mind.
Yeah,
I was like, oh my God. I think we went to her sister's baby shower, and that was the end of the relationship. I was like, we're in different places. Yeah. I need to go.
I think it's always it's sexy to a man until you start thinking about the baby aspect, and then you're like, wait, slow it down.
Yeah, it's a different thing. But I am having trouble I'm struggling with Jordan and Bill Belichick.
Maybe she's really into football, but what do they talk about if not?
Yeah,
that would have to be the basis.
Well, it sounds like she's running practices and stuff for him too. She's very this is a guy who honestly didn't, was his own. He didn't listen to Tom Brady about football. He didn't listen to his owner about football. But he's listening to Jordan.
The power of a woman.
The power of a woman. I mean, listen, God bless. I hope they're happy. Speaking of the power of powerful women, Christie Brinkley was here with us today. Now, I mean, that was, talk about an icon for me. That was amazing. She's a huge View fan.
I loved that. That makes me so excited.
Well, when I go back and say hello to the guests before they walk out, and she seemed to know who I was, which was the most, oh my God, Christie Brinkley knows who I am. But she said that her life is a series of sliding door moments, from how she helped her mom meet the man who became her father to becoming discovered as a model on the streets in Paris, and even how she met Billy Joel by walking into a random St. Bart's piano bar. Have you ever had a moment like this that something felt fated, or if you had just done something slightly different, your whole life would be different?
Oh, definitely. And what I will say I loved about her is, well, she was everything I wanted her to be and more, beautiful, so much fun and so warm at the table. But I also think the reason she feels she has those moments is because she has a very positive outlook on life. Because another way to look at it is like people often think about like the door they didn't open. And it was a lot more about like the doors that she did. And I think about it constantly. Very little of my career was planned and intentional. Like this job was the least intentional thing. And it kind of happened on a whim. You reached out to a million people. It could have gone a lot of different directions. But even every job up to there, I mean, the White House was on a whim. Like working for Pence, I was working for members of Congress, and we were in the middle of a massive legislative battle where we were on the other side of Trump in the White House. And Pence ended up crashing a meeting that my bosses were hosting at the Capitol Hill Club. And what happened is Pence went in a closed door meeting with all the lawmakers, and I'm standing outside with his chief of staff and his communications director. We ended up talking for 90 minutes because what else and a bunch of Secret Service. What else are you going to do? What I didn't know is they needed a press secretary, and I managed to impress them despite the fact that I was going to spend the next few days making their lives hell by messaging against what they were trying to do. But a lot of things like that where it was just pure luck and right place, right time, right relationship, right conversation. And I think, there's always things you could look at too of like, well, one thing I think about a lot is what if I'd never left the Pentagon and never gone and worked for Trump? Right. If I just stayed at DOD through the pandemic.
Where do you think you'd be now?
I honestly think I'd be working at like Boeing or like a defense contractor and would be doing corporate comms. And
that's a whole different life.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually incredible. It's much
Would you have still met your husband?
I would say it's much steadier work than that. Yes, we were together at that point.
Okay.
And there's a lot of bad I would have avoided, threats, hardship that came with that, but there's so much good I would have missed out on too.
Yeah, I don't have too many sliding door moments. I feel like I don't have anything I look back on and say like, oh, that was a mistake. I missed that opportunity.
But you've gotten to do a lot. I think we've both gotten to do.
Yeah, I feel very
surprising.
lucky. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I married who I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
I have the job I'm supposed to have. All those things.
Wait, a producer said to me, I won't call her out, the other day. She's like, "You seem like you really love your husband." She's like, "I was looking at your Instagram. You like really love." I was like, "Yeah, aren't you supposed to?"
Well, you're also a newlywed.
She was joking. They're also been married 20 years, but I was like, "Yeah, I actually really like him. I love him."
That's a good thing. All right, before we go, I have to call you out on this. Is it true you didn't know that Christie Brinkley was married to Billy Joel?
Yeah, I didn't. I thought her book was named Uptown Girl because she lived on like the Upper East Side.
Good Lord.
But I love both of them. I'm a huge Billy Joel fan, and I'm a huge Christie Brinkley fan. She was like the picture of beauty to me growing up, or one of them.
Yeah.
But I totally missed that. And I looked up too. I also know who their daughter is, and just never
made the
together.
connection. That's so funny to me. Oh man, because they were like an iconic couple before you were born.
But but when did they break up? 94.
94.
Yeah, that's why I didn't know. Because I know late 90s tabloid gossip well. Like I know the couples that were still together when I was like a little bit old enough to like read the headlines at
Billy Joel, a thing for you as a kid or too old?
Yeah, no, because my dad loved him. My mom and dad both did, so we'd listen to him. And
I'm a diehard Billy Joel fan.
I am too.
And I went to college in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So Allentown, that song was always every freshman girl's answering machine was "We're living here in Allentown."
I honeymooned in Nantucket and we played Down East and Alexa the whole time because it was like
named after his daughter. Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today, Alyssa. Tomorrow I'll be back with Sunny, and we will see you then.